Here we are on the little meow boat in Chicago, about to take the architecture tour. 90 minutes, floating down the river in Chicago.
Chicago River. Look at this.
On how to put on a life jacket. However, in the highly unlikely event of an emergency, a uniformed crew member will be there to assist you in the donning of life jackets.
Just from looking at it, this one you can figure out its name, right? It has its name tag on it, Trump International Hotel and Tower. Now, just by looking at this building, you can tell this is a newer building. How do you know that? Well, materials for one. Surface of the building covered in raised right here in Chicago. Adrian Smith, famous for also designing the tallest building in the world, the Burj Khalifa in Dubai. You want to get a sense of how tall the Burj Khalifa is? You can take two Trump towers, stack them on top of each other, including the spires, and that's about the height of the Burj Khalifa. So we don't have the tallest building in the world anymore here in Chicago, but we did raise the architect who went off and designed it. So we're going to count that, right? Now, as we look around at the different buildings here, you'll see we're going to be jumping all over in time on our tour. As we come out from underneath this bridge, we're heading into the groovy 1960s. Over here on the right, looking like corn on the cob. Very iconic towers here in Chicago. These are Marina City. Bertrand Goldberg is the name of the architect here. Bit of a social scientist, trying to change the way that people live. You see, back in the 1960s, not a lot of people lived downtown. They'd work here, they'd go home to the suburbs at night. We come into one of the most breathtaking parts of our river. Welcome everyone to Wolf Point, a 360-degree view of architecture. Most of the buildings you see around here built in just the last few years. Wolf Point's the name of the part of the river where the main branch, is what we're on, meets up with the south and north branches. And we're going on all three branches of the river here today. The river is why Chicago is here. If you head out through the south branch of the river, you can get out to the Mississippi, ultimately out to the Gulf of Mexico in one direction. Then you head out the other way through the Great Lakes, you can get out to the Atlantic Ocean, New York, and beyond. That makes Chicago the beating heart of the United States. Everything coming in and out from right here in Chicago. Straight in front of us, where the points of the river meet, this building is called River Point. That makes sense, right? But because of the parabolic arches on the top and bottom of the building, some folks say it looks like the box you microwave Hot Pockets in. They call it the Hot Pocket building. That arch on the bottom is to make way for a train line that runs underneath it. All the buildings on this side of the river, all built on top of like train lines. Now, like I told you, most of the buildings around here built in just the last few years. Salesforce Tower here on your right, going up right in front of your eyes. They're not quite done with it yet. But the next building I'm going to point out to you is the oldest building I have to show you on the river here today. Straight in front of us, you'll see this peachy pink building coming into view. This is Fulton House from the 1890s. Originally a cold storage warehouse back when Chicago had the nickname of Hog Butcher to the World. Down on the south side of the city on this polluted river back in the 1980s. But architects are forward thinking. Harry knew we would get around to cleaning things up. Now that we have, these are multi-million-dollar units down here on the river. So it seems like Harry had a pretty good idea. Now, as we pass underneath the bridge, we're going to see some more changing attitudes towards the river. Over here on our right is the East Bank Club from the 1980s. High-end fitness center. A lot of famous Chicagoans worked out here. Barack Obama, Oprah Winfrey, Michael Jordan, just to name a few. All right, guys, As we're coming back into Wolf's
Oldest building on the tour. Yeah.
Built in 1890.
Look at Lynn's shirt.
About it. One source
Yes.
there was wrong, but I'm going to share with you guys today some of the techniques that builders use to build these really tall buildings here in this very windy city. Now, you've probably heard of this one already. A lot of times these buildings are built to sway in the wind. That alleviates wind pressure on a building if the building can sway. Good for the building, not fun for the people inside. You can get seasick in a building like this. So to compensate for it, what they sometimes do is put giant tanks of water in the tops of the buildings. This building has around 200,000 gallons of water built into the top of it.
That's
When the building
crazy.
sways in the wind, all that water sloshes. And the weight of the water pulls the building back towards center quicker. If it overcompensates, it sloshes again, pulling the building back towards
That's
center.
crazy.
They're called inertial slosh dampeners. And they're the three techniques we'll talk about today for building these really tall buildings in this very windy city. Part of the film. It's actually our old post office. It was abandoned at the time of filming. I always imagine the Joker must have been so upset when he opened up his bags of cash and just found those old Montgomery Ward catalogs, right? But there really is a connection between this big old post office and that warehouse we saw. Back when Chicago was the catalog company king, we needed a great big post office to send off all that stuff. Once those catalog companies shut their doors, we didn't need a post office this big anymore. This building sat vacant for about 2 decades. But this is one of the most amazing examples of adaptive reuse. They ended up putting around $800 million into this building.
It has a little cloud right on top of it. Yeah.
They were outmatched. Their only hope was that this river would act as a natural boundary to protect the city from the flames. But remember the Union stockyards? There was so much hog fat on the surface of the river that night that the river caught
Ooh.
fire. Here's how the flames spread across the city.
That's cool. That looks like the old city to me.
What the heck is that?
That building with those cylinder shapes on top looks like a queen's crown or a chess piece. You might move around on a chessboard. The building from the 1990s, the cylinders on top can light up at night. And the lights from the top of that building were so bright when it first opened, it was confusing migratory birds. They thought it was the moon and they were getting lost. So now they dim the lights on that building during migration season. If you take a look at it tonight, it'll look pretty dim. It's one of my favorites. City of Big Shoulders, city that works. We're a very hard-working town. Chi-town for short. Siberia when it gets real cold. But how about the name Chicago? Where did that come from? Well, we have the indigenous people that were here before us to thank for that. Think back to when this was all swampland. There were these onions that grew along the banks of the river, and the onions stunk. And the indigenous people had a name for these onions. They called them Chicagoa, and that became the name for the whole region. So New York is the Big Apple, and Chicago is the Stinky Onion. That's what our name is. In town, the bottle's waiting for you at home. If you're looking for a good place to get a Chicago dog, not too far from where we drop you off, there's a restaurant called Portillo's. They do a great Chicago dog. They also have a great chocolate cake, which they will throw into a shake. Choice on the style of architecture. All you need to do is raise your hand with the number that you think is right. Are you ready? Well, we're going to do it anyway. The building from the 1980s covered in reflective glass. The reflective glass showing off the neighbors. The color of the glass very similar to the color of the river. As the river curves, the building curves along with it. Why? It's trying to look good in context. What do we call this style of architecture? Is it 1, Art Deco?
No.
Is it 2, contextualism?
Yes.
Or is it 3, black box modernism? Raise your hand with the number that you think is right. Give me those peace signs, you hippies. Yes, it is 2. Look at that. You learned something against your will on a boat today. Nicely done. All right, you did so well with that. Let's try another. Here in Chicago, we have a lot of public art. In Millennium Park, we have a piece of public art officially called Cloud Gate, but nobody in Chicago calls it
It's
that.
the beam.
We all call it the
B.
The beam. That's right. Fun fact about the beam, the artist who designed it hates that we call it that. So keep it up, everybody. Here's another piece of public art for you. The Merchandise Mart. What am I talking about? Well, on the other side of the river from the Merchandise Mart, you'll see this big black box full of projectors. If you come by here after dark, they project art onto the surface of the Merchandise Mart. It's a free public art program. They do it twice a night. They feature different artists throughout the year, and they call it, get this, Art on the Mart. Give that guy a raise, whoever came up with that one. You got the big black box here. You'll also see these green boxes down in the water. Those plants are there to provide fish a space to spawn and raise their young. They're called fish hotels. Back in the 1970s, they tested the river and they found out we have about 80 species of sorry, I was thrown by the train going by. So that's a good example of how the river is getting cleaner and healthier. Another story recently about the river is you might have seen these kayakers down in the water. Some of them have spotted this enormous snapping turtle sunning itself on rusted chains down in the water. They've seen it so often now, they have a nickname for it. They call it chonk. As we pull up next to the building, what I want you to do is find the clock tower in the center and count along with me the banks of windows on each side. You'll see there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 on this side of the clock tower. On the other side, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. That's a lopsided building. What's going on here? Well, when they built the LaSalle Street Bridge, they had to widen the street. To do so, they cut off a chunk of this building and rebuilt it so you wouldn't notice. You see, folks, this is why you go on these tours, right? All of us, we know what's up. Look at these people on the shore. Not a clue. Now, as we come out from underneath the bridge, over on the right, you'll see this building with a 55 on it. Another style of architecture we haven't talked about yet. Looks like an angry little fortress. We have another nickname for this building. We call it the Danny DeVito building. You can probably guess why. But let's take a look at some of the details. Deep set windows, concrete on the surface, kind of an intimidating style of architecture. This is called brutalism from the late 1960s. A lot of social upheaval in the U.S. at that time, so they wanted an intimidating style of architecture. Glass champagne bottle with gold foil around the neck. If you see it, point at us. Everybody can find it. Yeah, over on the right. The carbide and carbon building, soaring vertical lines and setbacks, let you know, Art Deco building. You know the style, you know what it's from, the Roaring 20s. What's going on in Chicago? Prohibition. Want to see how Chicagoans felt about not drinking alcohol? Look at the building that looks like a champagne bottle. Tells you everything you need to know. Might make you feel a little anxious, like there's no room for you. Well, as you take a look around, you'll see that's not usually how we build here in Chicago. There's a lot of room to breathe around our buildings. A lot of folks come here and they'll say, for such a big city, Chicago feels pretty laid back. Well, I would suggest to you it's our architecture that makes people feel that way. When there's room to breathe around the buildings, it feels like there's room for you. Architects can change the way you feel about a space that you're in.
Yes,
so with all this room to breathe around us, let's all take a nice deep breath together. What do you guys say? Ready? Here we go. Oh. How's everybody feeling? Having a good time so far? I'm having a great time with you. I know some of you are taking a look at where we dock over here on the left, thinking to yourself,
There's the Arctic.
oh no, the tour's almost over. Not today. I talked to the captain. We're going all the way out towards the lake. What do you guys say?
Yay!
We do it every tour. Now, probably my favorite building coming up here on our left. This is the Wrigley building. That's a name you'll see all over town. Wrigley Field. Wrigley Chewing Gum. That's all bubble gum money you're looking at there. This building from the 1920s, trying to look like a cathedral in Spain. Right across the street from a Tribune Tower where they used to make the Chicago Tribune newspaper. Top of that building trying to look like a French Gothic cathedral, also from the 1920s. In between the two, soaring vertical lines and setbacks, Art Deco building. But what's on the top? An onion dome. That's the Intercontinental Hotel today. Used to be the headquarters for the Shriners. A men's group with like Turkish details. That's why they put an onion on top of their building. You found the onion? Here's the Apple, our little Apple store with the cool see-through walls, right? Cool little building, but talk about subliminal marketing. Look at that iPad for a roof. You didn't even know you wanted one until you walked into the place. You found the Apple. Now here's the Peacock. NBC Tower trying to look like Rockefeller Center in New York. Rockefeller Center, beautiful Art Deco building from the roaring 20s.
That's so
We didn't
gorgeous.
build ours until 1989. That doesn't count as Art Deco. So if you're copying the Art Deco style,
But it
they call
looks
this
like it.
Eco Deco.
Ah!
Cutting across the river, another international style building, big white box with black stripes on it. Sun's going to be in your eyes there, so you might want to hold up your hand. This is the 4th tallest building in Chicago. Used to be owned by Standard Oil, the Aon Center today. This building, when it first opened, covered in white marble. That white marble did not like Chicago winters. It started to crack and fall off the building. They had to replace it floor by floor with granite at the cost of $1 million per floor. There are 80 floors on that building. I'll let you do the math. Then we have this brown building with a stripe on it. We don't care about it. Look at the one behind it. That's Aqua Tower from 2009. Those wavy lines are patios designed that way, so it looks like water flowing across the surface of the building. Get it? Aqua Tower. Designed by a superstar architect as well. Her name, Jeannie Gang. Jeannie Gang, born in the Midwest, went off to Harvard, won a MacArthur Genius. Designed by a female-led architectural firm. So we're very proud of that, changing face of architecture here in Chicago. And this building has all 3 techniques we're going to talk about today for
Lynn,
building
point
really
at it.
tall buildings in
Look
this
at me.
very windy city.
Aww.
Top of that tower, hundreds of thousands of gallons of water.
It looks
the
like a
building
Dr.
sways in the wind, the water
Dr.
sloshes.
Seuss
Those
building.
inertial
Yeah.
slosh dampeners, also here at the St. Regis. Then remember the bundling technique from the Sears Tower. Take a look at the stair steps of the St. Regis. Each of those smaller towers, adding support to that tallest tower. But here's the one we haven't mentioned yet, up at the 83rd, 84th floor of the building. The cross shape up there, you might have noticed you can look right through. That's because there's no walls, there's no windows. Those are blow-through floors. You want to alleviate some of the wind pressure on a building, let the wind blow right through. It's a great design solution, but it's
Looks
also
like buildings in Miami.
surprisingly each. That 61st person was a bartender. Every one of those cars had its own bar, probably because you needed some liquid encouragement to get on the world's first Ferris wheel. Now we're going to do our own turnaround out here near the lake, give you guys another opportunity to take some photographs of our beautiful skyline.
Hey, it's Leah and Lynn from the future, and we just wanted to remind you to
Like, share, and subscribe. And if you don't mind, hit that notification bell so you will know when we upload new videos. And stay groovy.
yeah.